Hey there, hope you're having a wonderful day. So in the previous two videos, we went over structs and classes and access specifiers in C++. So we have public, private, and protected. And we're not going to go over protected until we cover the topic of inheritance. So in C++, structs are public by default and classes are private. And so in the previous two videos, we created a struct and class to represent a student. In this video, we're going to create a new class, and this will be the class that we'll be using for subsequent lessons in object-oriented programming in C++. So there's a lot of topics that we can use this new class for, and that is we're going to define a fraction class. So we have a lot of built-in number types, such as integers, floats, double. So for example, you can have 0.25f for a float or 0.25 for a double, and this is 1 divided by 4. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a fraction class to represent this exact number in a different way. And a fraction has a numerator and a denominator. So I basically want to create a fraction class that will represent 0.25 like this, 1 over 4. And this is not a primitive data type, so we're going to create a class to represent this value. So I'm going to create a class, fraction, don't forget the semicolon. And as we mentioned earlier, a fraction has two data members, numerator and denominator. So let's create an instance of this fraction class. So over here, I'm going to do fraction frac. And right now, numerator and denominator do not have any values, so let's set them. So I'm going to do frac.numerator and set it to 11. And frac.denominator, I'll set this to 15. So frac will be 11 over 15. And now you can see on my screen, we get this squiggle. And if I hover over, you can see it says member fraction numerator is inaccessible. And the same thing for denominator. And that is because we are using class. And by default, the access specifier for a class is private. Now I could just define this as public, but instead of doing this, I want to introduce the concept of getters and setters. And the concept is very simple. Basically, we're going to create two methods, one for getting a data member value and one for setting a data member value. So here I can do void set numerator, and I'll pass in an integer n, and I can do numerator is equal to n. And then I can add a getter. So here I want to get the numerator, so I'm going to do return type int get numerator, and we don't need to pass in anything. And here I'm just going to return numerator. And we can do the same for the denominator. So over here I'm going to do void set denominator int n, and I'll do denominator is equal to n. And we can also do the same for get denominator. So int get denominator return denominator. All right, so now we have our four methods, and let's scroll down. And over here, I'm going to comment these two lines out, and I'm going to call frac.setNumerator and pass in 11, and frac.setDenominator and pass in 15. And you can see we still get an error. So let's see what happens if we hover over the squiggle, and it says function setNumerator is inaccessible, and the same for denominator. So the reason why it's not accessible is because classes are private by default. So I need to go up to our class, and here we're going to specify public, and just to make it more readable, we're going to indent everything, okay? So now these data members are private, whereas these methods over here are public, okay? And here you can see we no longer have the error message. And why don't we call get numerator and get denominator as well? So over here, I'm going to do std cout frac.get numerator frac.get denominator. All right, now let's save and run our program. And here you can see we get 11 over 15 for our fraction. So the numerator is 11 and the denominator is 15. Now, what's the point of using getters and setters? Why don't we just use a struct? Well, if we use a class and make the data members private by default, we can control what values are being set to the data members. So for example, the denominator can never be 0 in a fraction. So over here, I can't do frac.denominator and set it to 0 directly. However, I can still do so using the method setDenominator. So in the method, I can make a check. If n is equal to 0, we're going to print an error message. Denominator cannot be 0. And we'll return. And now if I try to do frac.setDenominator to 0, and I save and run the program, you can see we get an error message, denominator cannot be 0. Okay, so with a getter, we get the value of the data member without changing anything. And with a setter, we can change the value, but inside the setter method, we can also check what kind of values are acceptable. And one more thing I want to add is we have this print statement over here. We can move this inside the fraction class. So over here, I can add another method, void print fraction. And here I'm just going to do std cout. And over here, we don't need to call getNumerator because this is inside the fraction class. So we have access to the data member numerator. Okay. And the same for denominator. All right, now let's scroll back down. And over here, I'm going to call frac.printFraction. All right, now let's save and run our program. And you can see this is from our earlier print statement where we call getNumerator and getDenominator. And this is from the method printFraction, okay? All right, so that's pretty much the idea of using getters and setter methods in our classes in C++. Basically, we can control what values can be set to our data members. All right, so that's it for this video. Hopefully you found this video helpful. And if you did, make sure you give this video a like. If you have any questions, let me know down below in the comments. And as always, if you want to stay up to date for more C++ tutorials like this one, make sure you subscribe to the channel and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.